in conclusione di una bella settimana per Elli e per tutti noi, dall'isola alla nuvola, è stato, credo, una bella settimana. Grazie Elli. As you know, we are approaching the end of a political cycle. Lesson learned. First, I think that the two black swans of the pandemic and of the Russian aggression in Ukraine sent shockwaves throughout our economies. But equally unprecedented was our response. It was a response marked not by austerity, but by fairness and solidarity. Not austerity, but fairness and solidarity. I am particularly proud to have designed, together with Nico Schmidt, the SURE instrument in the darkest months of the pandemic. And then finance ministers agreed on this instrument. And let me recall that among these finance ministers we had Olaf, Magdalena, and Roberto, the mayor of Rome. Grazie, Roberto. SURE supported almost 1/3 of total employment and over 1/4 of firms. It was a European success, and it paved the way for the big program of Next Generation EU. I believe we can be proud of what we achieved. This would not have been possible without our political family. We were the one proposing SURE. We were the one initially proposing the Recovery Fund. We were the one launching the Green Deal at European level. We were the one managing cohesion funds in an innovative way. Please remember that this is our record, and it is a record we should defend as we campaign for the European elections. And I'm sure that Nico Schmidt is the best person we have to defend our record. Yes, we cannot ignore the challenges our citizens are confronted with. In the euro area, we have gone from 8.6% of inflation to 2.6%. But this still means that prices today are more than 10% higher than they were 2 years ago, and wages have not kept up. Our recovery has been job-rich, but not salary-rich. Higher interest rates and the dearth of housing have made home ownership all but a dream in too many of our cities, and the Green Deal is facing headwinds. Many see it as a cost rather than investment in our future, as it is. And finally, digitalization and the spread of AI hold great promise, but may also have a profound impact on large part of the workforce and increase inequalities. So looking ahead, the question then is how can we finance the necessary investments in the green and digital transition, in transport and infrastructure, in defense and security, in reskilling and upskill? How do we ensure that no one is left behind? Yes, we have more balanced rules, more midterm oriented, but we need new step forward. And my view is crystal clear. Common financing of EU common goods should be part of the solution. This form of just debt could be at the heart of a new pact for European intergenerational solidarity. Recovery plans and SURE have proved to be good blueprints for future initiatives of this kind. And finally, taxation has also a role to play, both to finance our common goals and to build a fairer economic system. During this mandate, we concluded an important agreement on minimal taxation for multinationals. We have been the first to introduce a carbon border adjustment mechanism. But the fight against tax evasion and avoidance must be a key part of the socialist platform. Equally important, in my view, is to rebalance the tax burden between labor and capital. Europe, dear Nico, Europe perhaps needs its own IRA. We discussed a lot about the Americans' IRA, but probably we need an inequality reduction act in Europe in the coming years. So these are the 100 days to go to the European elections. Let's make every day count. As we used to say here in Italy, al lavoro e alla lotta. E forza Nico!
Bravo Paolo, grazie mille, grazie mille. Ciao. And now, to discuss some solutions for a better quality of life, I would like to introduce and ask on stage the panelists for this discussion. Elisa Ferreira, European Commissioner for Cohesion and Reforms. Olivier Faure, leader of the French Party of Socialists. Please, Elisa, please join. Francine Klausner, co-leader of the Luxembourgish Socialist Workers' Party. Peđa Grbin, the leader of Croatian Social Democrats. And Vasco Cordero, president of the European Committee of the Regions. A warm applause, please, for the panelists. Thank you so much for being here. And I start with you, Elisa. So our family is a fighting family for a better quality of life for everyone, of course, but first and foremost also for our youth and our future generations. But how do we avoid the brain drain of the young people, the young generation?
Yes, this is a basic question, because we need these young people, qualified people, in order that Europe can perform and can play its competitive game in the world economy. And the important aspect I would like to underline is that these people are living places where they are needed. They are needed to re-establish the growth, the dynamism in those places. Just to give you an example, 1 in 5 young qualified people are leaving countries that need them desperately, such as Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia. And this happens in specific areas. And if these areas are not looked after with cohesion, with investment, with new opportunities being opened, what happens is that these young people, qualified people, leave their regions, leave their families, and they end up in the surrounding areas of the big agglomerations with a bad quality of life. They often end up leaving Europe and going somewhere else to have a better life. It is essential that cohesion policy, and we have been working together, Nico and myself, with Paola, with other colleagues, exactly to combine place-based policies with social policies by creating an environment in which young families can grow, can have proper life, can have good salaries and a good quality of life.
Thank you. Thank you, Elisa. Olivier, so we heard already before the cost of living crisis is at the heart of the workers' concerns, and inequality is also on the rise. How do we ensure a better sharing of wealth in our societies?
Merci, je vais vous parler en français.
Oui.
D'abord, vous dire que je suis très sensible à l'hommage qui tout à l'heure a été rendu à Jacques Delors, mais je voudrais associer un autre nom, un immense Français et Européen qui nous a quittés récemment, qui est Robert Badinter, qui fut à l'origine de l'abolition de la peine de mort en France et qui toute sa vie s'est battu pour qu'elle soit éradiquée de tout le continent européen et même du monde. Quelques mots pour vous dire d'abord quel est le contexte dans lequel nous vivons. 93 millions de nos concitoyens européens sur 450 vivent avec moins de 60% du revenu médian. Si je vous parle de la France, je vous parle de notre pays où il y a aujourd'hui 9 millions de Français sur 68 qui vivent sous le seuil de pauvreté, 4,5 millions de mal logés, un étudiant sur 10 qui a passé l'hiver dans sa voiture plutôt que de la passer dans un logement. Et je parle de la France, l'une des 3 plus grandes puissances économiques d'Europe. Au même moment, nous avons le CAC 40, les 40 entreprises les plus importantes de France, celles qui sont cotées en bourse, qui ont réalisé des bénéfices gigantesques, qui ont réussi à distribuer près de 100 milliards d'euros à leurs actionnaires dans l'année qui vient de s'écouler. Et le gap, il est là. Il y a une énorme différence entre ceux qui subissent les crises et ceux qui en profitent. Au même moment, le gouvernement français, lui, a fait un choix. Privilégier systématiquement les grandes entreprises et les grandes fortunes. Ils vont maintenant, dans les prochaines semaines, dérembourser une partie des médicaments, notamment pour ceux qui subissent des affections de longue durée. Ils vont, pour la 3e fois en 3 ans, rogner encore sur l'assurance chômage. Ils vont, sur les 10 milliards d'économies budgétaires qu'ils ont demandées, faire en sorte de baisser les budgets de l'avenir, l'éducation et l'écologie. Alors, toute la question est de savoir ce que nous, sociodémocrates, socialistes, travaillistes, allons proposer. Qui va payer ? Qui va payer pour nos services publics, pour l'éducation, pour la santé, pour la sécurité collective? Eh bien, nous devons proposer de faire en sorte que ce soit les plus riches qui soient à l'origine de la compensation de ces budgets en baisse, faire en sorte que nous puissions assurer une juste répartition. Faire en sorte de rappeler que la social-démocratie, ce n'est pas le libéralisme en rose. La social-démocratie, c'est de construire un rapport de force. Et la force, elle est là, elle est avec nous, avec les socialistes européens. Faire en sorte que nous puissions construire effectivement un monde plus juste, un monde dans lequel, avec Nicolas Schmitt, nous ferons en sorte que les nouveaux esclaves, ceux qui travaillent sur les plateformes, eh bien, soient enfin assurés d'avoir les mêmes droits que tous les salariés. De faire en sorte que nous ne soyons pas égoïstes au point de penser que nous avons un sort qui serait différent de celui des autres, faire en sorte que la directive sur les devoirs de vigilance soit aussi enfin adoptée pour éviter le dumping social entre nos pays et les pays du Sud. Voilà ce que nous devons porter dans cette campagne, faire en sorte d'assurer une juste répartition. Merci.
Merci Olivier. Merci. Welcome also Chris. So, on a slightly different subject, the COVID pandemic made us all aware of how fragile our medical supply chains are. But how can the EU help to strengthen the supply and affordability of medicines?
Thank you very much. Yes, COVID was a nightmare. I was Minister of Health during COVID, so I know this. And 7 million people around the world died because of COVID. But even the darkest cloud has a silver lining. And the silver lining of COVID was our joint vaccine policy, our European joint vaccine policy. A study by WHO Europe in January of this year showed that in Europe alone we saved 1.4 million lives because of our vaccine policy. And this was because we did something which is socialist. We managed to come together, we managed to negotiate together, we managed to procure together, and most importantly, we managed to deploy our vaccines simultaneously across the whole European Union. Solidarity and putting people before profits. And that is something socialist. And I don't know whether you've noticed this, but during a crisis, Europe goes back to its socialist values. And it's up to us to show that it pays Europe not only to be socialist when there is a crisis, but to be socialist all the time. And this is what we have to convince people in June of this year. European elections are an important point for us to make sure that socialism is the default situation in Europe. When it comes to medicines and availability of medicines, we have a problem. Last winter, not this winter, because this winter was mild, but last winter we had shortages of antibiotics and other medicines across Europe, mostly because of supply chains, mostly because over the years production of the raw materials have gone outside Europe, and then we had problems bringing them back. But this is also something that regards our security. We have talked a lot about security because of the problems with Ukraine, with Gaza, with the Red Sea. We have talked a lot about security. And yes, we need to talk about defense. We need to talk about building up our defense systems. But we also need to remember that during wars, if you look at any war that's happened, more people die from diseases than people die from bombs and bullets. So we have to make sure that we have the medical supplies available in Europe, and this is something which is of security and of national European security importance. And therefore, yes, governments in Europe has to intervene. We have to make sure that we have enough supplies here in Europe for our European citizens.
Thank you. Thank you. Francine, you're from Luxembourg, and Luxembourg is at the heart of the single market. How can we use the single market to create opportunities for our industries?
Thank you very much. I would like to start with a big thank you for your support for Nicolas Schmit. It is really a great honor for Luxembourg and for our Socialist Party that you support him for this fight that we need to fight. And it's the right guy, you know. I know him for many years. We worked together in government, and he's a really great socialist, but he's also a humanist, and he's a fighter against injustice. He's a fighter for decent wages, for decent jobs, and that's what we need right now to build trust. That's what Antonio Costa said. We need the trust in our ideas and give people this trust and this confidence. There he is, Nicolas Schmit. Nico, I'm really happy that you are here and that you have the support of all these people in this room and abroad. Thank you for doing this, Nico. To the subject, indeed, Luxembourg is the cradle of United Europe, and the support of the European integration was almost self-evident in Luxembourg, as we were offered by the single market so many opportunities to grow and prosper. As you perhaps know, 50% of our population in Luxembourg don't have a Luxembourgish passport, and more than 250,000 people commute cross-border every day. So we know about integration, we know about inclusion and the importance also of social cohesion. Now, in times of polycrisis, people worry about future and about what transition means to them. Of course, green and digital transition is key for our industry, opens new opportunities, of course. The Net Zero Industry Act is key as well, but we need strong rules. We need strong rules for the industry everywhere, and we need to assure that people from the whole Europe can benefit of these opportunities. Otherwise, there will be no confidence in the future.
True.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Francine. Peja, we move to Croatia. So, after almost a decade of conservative rule in your country, the Croatian people are facing unprecedented inequalities. But you, as a Social Democratic Party, how would you address this?
Thank you very much for this question, but prima di tutto vorrei dire che sono molto felice di stare qui a Roma. Voglio dire buongiorno Italia, buongiorno Roma. Grazie. Stamattina qui non ho trovato l'invasor, ma ho trovato tantissime compagne e compagni con quali ho il grande privilegio di lottare contro il fascismo e per la libertà. And one of the greatest parts of the freedom is to be free from need. And this is fight against inequality, to be free from need. And this is why it is extremely important that we have a guy like Nicholas leading us in this campaign, because he has been fighting against the inequality throughout his whole tenure in the European Commission. I come from a country where 1/4 of workers earn less than 800 euros a month. Half of workers earn less than 1,000 euros a month. You can imagine how difficult it is to live with such wages in the time of inflation. So for us in Croatia, it's extremely important to put emphasis on the programs that will bring down this inequality. In the core of our program, not only for the European elections, but for the national elections as well, is the fight for greater salaries and the fight for greater pensions. And this is the only way we can surpass this inequality. We, of course, have to tackle every other aspect of the political life, but here and now, the most important part of this is to have our people being equal to the others. And I have been listening to the situation in Luxembourg. A lot of people from my country have emigrated because now we have open borders. It's so easy to go to Austria, it's so easy to go to Germany, Ireland, where wages are greater. And if we do not invest more from our European funds in people, in their works, jobs, instead of concrete and infrastructure projects, then our European project will be in huge danger. And this is why we want to put emphasis on this. Inequality, higher salaries, higher pensions. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you. And welcome, Vasco, President of the Committee of the Regions. And in your capacity, you have an overview from local and regional and European. What are the current and future priorities in the cooperation between all those different levels, local, regional, national, and European?
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And to get to the point, I think the first aspect would be the transitions, the green and the digital. But mainly the green transition, because in this issue, the cooperation between the several levels of government is a key to success. Not only to duly implement this transition, but especially in a moment like this where the right is trying to picture the climate concerns as some form of extremism, some form of climate radicalism, the cooperation make this reforms, make this transition happen at local and regional level is key to explain to people, mainly and also to farmers, the importance that a green transition has for the sustainability and the survival of that activity. Second issue, public services. European funds, mainly through cohesion policy, are of the utmost importance to make this happen. It cannot only happen at national level, at European level. You need communities, you need local and regional communities to provide them to the citizens. Third, enlargement and reforms. The cooperation with all the levels of government is key. Why? Not only to explain and prepare the European communities, local and regional, to the importance, to the usefulness of enlargement, but also to help local and regional authorities in the acceding countries to better prepare to meet our standards. In all these three levels, the cooperation between local, regional, national and European are a key to success. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasco. Thank you. Elisa, Vasco was already touching the subject. How can we fight the green discontent and have a just transition?
Well, first of all, we have got to keep our targets, our decision in what concerns the European contribution to limit the climate problem. That is no question about it, but we have got to do that by looking at each community, at each region, and to making sure that this adaptation keeps industry, keeps agriculture, keeps services in Europe, and that the quality jobs are kept in Europe. This is the core of the secret, so we need to make sure that our decisions on global targets are previsible, that they are stable, but this requires a detailed approach on each location to see in concrete terms how you can adapt and keep a quality of life there. The second issue that I would like to underline is that at this moment, the funds, European funds, are doing this kind of support in all those areas that are covered by the Just Transition Fund. So the Just Transition Fund is exactly an experiment on which the work done by Nicola Schmidt, what was said here by Paolo Gentiloni, we have got to get together and to make sure that we have the funds to manage the transition, keeping the social aspect prevailing in this transition. My last comment is that, as Jacques Delors said, we have to do also the enlargement, but it is impossible to do a successful enlargement without a reinforcement of cohesion policy. That is the lesson learned from the past, and we have got to take it with us as a good example for the future. And our colleague from Croatia just mentioned what I previously was trying to illustrate. If we let our population disappear from certain countries, from certain regions, this is a real important source of discontent, of depression, of lack of hope. If you train your children, if you educate your children, and that they cannot find a proper life in the place where they were trained and where they want to stay, you are lost. And this is what our friend and comrade Enrico Letta said very clearly in one of his important presentations: the right to move, but also the right to stay if you want to stay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elisa. Thank you. And Olivier, you are from France, and there have been quite a lot of farmer protests in France and across Europe. And how can we show them that there is not a contradiction in the Green Deal? How can we improve both sustainability of our agriculture and improve the lives of farmers across the EU?
Merci, c'est pas si simple. Effectivement, tu viens de le rappeler, nous vivons encore une grande crise agricole en France qui s'est soldée par un grand mouvement social qui n'est pas complètement achevé et qui nous interroge sur la place de l'agriculture, avec un risque politique au demeurant qui est de voir l'extrême droite progressivement grignoter sur l'électorat paysan au motif qu'il y aurait aujourd'hui une contradiction entre la question écologique et la question agricole. Et nous, ce que nous devons rappeler en permanence, c'est que l'ennemi de l'agriculture, ça n'est pas l'écologie, c'est le libéralisme. Et faire en sorte d'apporter un espoir de substitution à celui que semble apporter l'extrême droite aujourd'hui en Europe. Et cet espoir, nous devons l'incarner à travers des mesures simples, compréhensibles par tous. D'abord, faire en sorte qu'on ne puisse pas importer de l'extérieur du continent européen des produits qui ne respectent pas nos normes. Il faut des clauses miroirs. Il faut faire appliquer aussi ce que nous avons déjà obtenu au Parlement européen, à savoir le bannissement du travail forcé, le bannissement des produits agricoles issus de la déforestation. Il faut faire en sorte aussi de réserver les marchés publics européens d'abord à la production agricole européenne. Enfin, il faut se dire les choses très simplement. Il faut réformer la PAC, faire en sorte qu'elle ne profite plus d'abord aux très grandes exploitations. En France, il y a 80% de la PAC qui est redistribuée sur 20% des agriculteurs et des éleveurs. Il y a là, évidemment, un énorme chantier qui est devant nous. Faire en sorte que nous en finissions avec la prime à l'hectare, la prime à ceux qui développent d'immenses fermes et permettre à nouveau à ceux qui développent une agriculture familiale, une agriculture paysanne, de pouvoir continuer à vivre de leur travail. Et donc, ça suppose de respecter un principe simple. Personne ne devrait aujourd'hui vendre à perte. Personne ne devrait vendre en dessous de son coût de production. Et c'est malheureusement ce qui se passe aujourd'hui, ce qui fait que vous avez aujourd'hui 25%, un quart des agriculteurs et éleveurs français qui aujourd'hui vivent sous le seuil de pauvreté. La réponse, elle est dans la transition agricole, dans une PAC qui soutient la transition écologique, dans une Europe qui soutient la grande transition que nous devons impérativement produire si nous voulons à la fois sauver l'agriculture et sauver la planète. Merci.
Merci. Merci. And a better quality of life is also about health, as we discussed before. So what do you see as a critical issue for the EU action when it concerns health?
Well, how many hours have I got? Because certainly the climate, the Commissioner just mentioned, the climate crisis is a health crisis, so that is certainly one of them. Mental health is certainly something that we need to give a lot of attention to here in Europe. And then the need to invest more in our healthcare workforce, because we are getting problems with finding enough healthcare workers to look after our patients here in Europe. But I would like to concentrate mostly on one specific issue, which is the pandemic accord, because this is something urgent, and this is urgent in the sense of days rather than weeks. We are at a very critical issue, at a very critical junction when it comes to finding agreement on a pandemic accord. I am the President of the World Health Assembly. On the 27th of May, there is a risk that I will open the World Health Assembly in Geneva and report to delegates that we have missed the boat and not found an agreement on the pandemic accord. And this will be catastrophic. We need to learn from COVID, but then we need to act on what we have learned from COVID. And now is the time to find a solution, to come together and have a pandemic accord. And the main thing is the vision between the developed world and the global south. We are asking the global south to give us the data so that we can, of the new pathogens, so that we can produce vaccines. But then, rightly, the global south is asking us, we will give you the data, but you have to give us the vaccines. And this is something that we have to do. We have to reach this agreement. It's a question of developed world helping less developed world. This is something which is also socialist. This is something that we need to do. The world needs European leadership in health, but the world needs European socialist leadership in health. And people in this room can do it. We can do this. We can make a change, not only in Europe, but across the globe. And this will continue to make us proud to be European and proud to be socialists. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Francine, we know that we need new skills also for this green and digital transition. What role can the EU play there?
I'm a very strong believer in education, and I think that young people are well aware of the green and the digital transition and what that means for them. So I'm convinced that we should not only talk to them, but we should participate them in the constructing our society of tomorrow. That's very important. If you're talking about education and on the same time you're cutting funds of education, that doesn't make any sense. So I think we should encourage everyone to invest much more in education than we did until now. That's the first thing I want to say. Second thing, when we're talking about education, we are talking about jobs. Yes. And with the green and the digital transition, of course, about jobs of today and of tomorrow and of jobs who will disappear. So upskilling, reskilling is key for this transition to succeed. And I think it's 7 years ago, together with Nicolas Schmidt, we started in Luxembourg a project who was called Digital Skills Bridge. So we confronted companies to ask them what they need in future and help them to invest properly, that they can invest in their people. So that was the start. We were a sort of a front runner And I hope that the plans and the projects from EU will go in the same direction in the next months.
Thank you, yes. Thank you very much. Quality of life also means to have a nice house, but there we are in the middle of a very bad housing crisis, and also in Zagreb and other major cities, they're facing an explosion of housing costs. How can progressives, social democrats across Europe tackle the housing crisis?
The housing
May I
crisis in
ask a little bit
Croatia.
of silence, please, as well.
The housing crisis in Croatia is indeed very, very big. Just to show you what we are talking about, the average price of a square meter of apartment around Croatia and in Zagreb, it's higher, is 3,000 euros. I've mentioned before the median wage in Croatia is 1,000 euros. So the worker that has median wage has to work 3 months without eating, drinking or anything he can breathe at all to pay for 1 square meter of an apartment. So this is unsustainable. And this has been aggravated by the fact that we have, of course, by entering the European Union, had to open the access to our market to the people who have much higher income. And especially in the cities like Zagreb and in the coastal area of Croatia, the prices have skyrocketed. That's why one of the part of our electoral program for the national elections in Croatia is going to be affordable housing. We have created a plan that will allow us to build thousands of apartments that will be given to Croatian citizens at affordable prices, either to be bought by them or to be rented to them. Yeah. This is extremely important. And just to depict how important it is, I will say what can be more social, democratic and sustainable for a country than to have affordable housing. In my opinion, nothing. Thank you.
It starts there. Thank you, Preben. Vasco, how do you see the future of the EU cohesion policy? It's a general question, but please.
Well, I think you're entitled to a clear and straight answer.
Yes.
The way I see it is threatened, in danger, at risk. That's the way I see the future of cohesion policy. And that's why I think it's much needed for our political family, as it is done in our manifesto for the next elections, to take a clear stand in defense of cohesion policy. Because it's not only a question of an European policy, cohesion policy is the European policy that makes Europe more visible in each and every local community of Europe. So if you don't have a cohesion policy, sooner or later, you will have a problem about how people see, or you will have one more problem of how people see Europe. They won't see it. The reason is not only because of the European way of dealing with this issue. Of course, one of the guilty ones are also local and regional and national leaders that don't recognize, don't acknowledge the importance of European funds and cohesion funds whenever they do a groundbreaking ceremony or an opening of an investment paid with European funds. But it's not only with the single market that you can build Europe. Cohesion policy was established as a key component to counterbalance, if the expression is somehow correct, single market policy. Without cohesion policy, you won't have Europe as we know it. And in a time where we face and try and alert for the risks of extremism, of populism, it is needed a wake-up call for our leaders to defend cohesion policy. Cohesion policy at this moment equals the importance of the European project. It's not conceivable that we are going to face these European elections not only stating that we, Socialists, Democrats, want a cohesion policy that makes Europe happen everywhere, but also demanding from our adversaries what are their stance about cohesion policy. What do they think about cohesion policy? That's how you can clarify and explain to citizens of Europe what is at stake in this election. So, to build a social, democratic, sustainable Europe, well, you need cohesion policy for that.
Well, thank you for that, Vasco. Thank you. Thank you all panelists. Thank you very much. Very interesting discussion. Thank you, Elisa. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Olivier. Thank you, Francine. Thank you, Pedja and Vasco. Thank you very much. And we are here for an election congress for the European elections. So we again ask on stage a few heads of lists for the national elections in Europe. And I would like to ask on stage for this next session Mohammed Shahim from the Netherlands, PvdA, GroenLinks from the Netherlands, Klara Dobrev, the party leader of DK Hungary, and Raphael Glucksmann, the head of the list of the European election in France. Yes, please. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. You're going to fight, you're going to win the seats for us in your countries. That's the idea. So, Klara, you have been a strong advocate for democracy and social rights both in Europe and back home. Are those featured in your campaign?
This is going to... Now, yes, this is going to be #1 feature in our campaign. You know, once upon a time, Hungary was one of the best countries in Central Eastern Europe. From the Baltics to the Romanian, Bulgarian coast, Poland, Slovakia, Czech Republic, all the people looked at us Hungarians that they want a lifestyle, a living standard as we have. And then came a far-right populist more than 10 years ago. And now, more than 10 years after Viktor Orban's far-right populism, we have the worst salaries in Europe, we have the worst pension in Europe, we have the worst healthcare in Europe, we have the worst performance and the highest inflation in Europe. So when your voters ask you whether they can vote for far-right populists, whether rule of law, democracy is important or not, then the only thing you should show them how populists deliver on government. They promise the sky, but then they deliver nothing.
Thank you, Klara. Mohammed, welcome. You've been a real fighter in the European Parliament for the ambitious Green Deal. Will it also be at the heart of your national campaign in the Netherlands?
I mean, I think everything depends on the narrative. When we fight for a greener Europe, we basically fight for a more social Europe and a more just Europe. You know, we're talking about clean air in our urban cities. We're talking about fighting premature death. We're talking about creating new industry, new jobs for people. You know, that's what we're doing. I mean, if that's the core of I think that should be the core of the elections. And therefore, I believe that every social democrat should be green. Because at the end of the day, we talk about the honest allocation of means, and therefore I believe that it has to be at the core of the elections.
Well, I think we can support you on that. Hello, Raphael, welcome. So you have been very strong on international issues always in your country, from protesting the war in Ukraine to fighting for the human rights of the Uyghur. And will these issues also be part of your European election campaign?
So, first, buongiorno Roma e molto buongiorno Sardegna. L'estrema destra non è una fatalità, quando c'è lotta ci può avere vittoria. So, and to respond to your question, 100% yes. And I will tell you, we have to be the family of human rights. From China to Rafah, we have to be strong. for our principles, otherwise we will disappear. And yes, we will bring this topic everywhere. Europe stands for human rights, and Europe stands for international law, and Europe stands for Ukraine. And let me be very clear, these elections are the most important European elections in history, because we are in a continent that is shaken and hammered by a war launched by Putin, but also because on 5th of November, you have election in the US and you can have Trump as president, which means we will have to stay alone in front of war. And I can tell you, I have chaired the Special Committee on Foreign Interference in Europe, in the European Parliament. And this war is not only targeting Ukraine, it's targeting our democracies. And in this war, Putin has allies inside our democracies. All the far-right parties, AfD, FPO, Lega, name them, National Rally, they are not only dangerous from inside, they are puppets of a foreign tyranny. And we have to say it. And we have to be the family defending democracy. But for that to happen, we have always to remember for whom we fight. Pour qui nous combattons. Et nous combattons pour qui? Pour les millions de travailleurs des plateformes qui n'ont aucun droit. Nous voulons des droits pour eux. Nous combattons pour les fermiers qui travaillent 70 heures par semaine pour toucher 700 € par mois à cause d'une politique agricole commune qui rétribue les plus riches au lieu de rétribuer les plus faibles. Nous combattons pour ces femmes à travers toute l'Europe qui touchent pour travail égal un salaire bien inférieur. Nous combattons pour les minorités qui font face à une vague de xénophobie sans précédent sur notre continent. Nous combattons pour les sans-droits et les sans-voix, et c'est pour ça que nous sommes sociaux-démocrates. Alors oui, ces élections sont cruciales, et je suis venu vous dire une chose. En France, nous allons parler d'Europe partout. Nous allons parler d'une Europe qui sera forte parce qu'elle sera juste. Et c'est cela notre message. Et nous comptons sur la grande famille européenne pour faire campagne avec nous et à la fin, gagner ces élections.
Merci. Merci, Raphael. Thank you, Clara. Thank you, Mohammed. We stand with you. The whole family stands with you. Good luck in your campaign. And now I would like to call on stage my colleague Thomas Waupel.
My name is Thomas Vaupel. I'm, as Jonek and Saar, Deputy Secretary General of the PS, and I have the pleasure now to invite on stage Magdalena Andersson, the former Prime Minister of Sweden and leader of SAP Sweden now. Magdalena, please come to stage. Oh, yeah, go here. So we're changing a bit the program. Normally you were supposed to be in the panel 3, but we're a bit behind schedule. So and we didn't want to miss you, so we're having this talk now, which is a pleasure. And Magdalena, so with Europe being in turbulent times, with new global challenges, new global insecurities, what is your perspective on building and strengthening European security in these turbulent times, one has to say? Please.
I think the answer to how we strengthen European security is rather simple. It's about supporting Ukraine, and supporting Ukraine. And it's obvious that so far this war has been a strategic mistake from Putin. He did not win Ukraine as quickly as it wanted on the battlefield, and I don't think he expected that Sweden and Finland would join NATO. We were able to stand together. We united in Europe in order to sanction Russia and in order to support Ukraine. But 2 years into this war, our unity is tested, and we need to step up. There is a lack of ammunition in Ukraine. We have to deliver it from European factories, but also brought from countries outside Europe. That is absolutely necessary. But this is also why the EU elections is so important. We need parliamentarians that want a strong Europe, that wants us to unite against Russia, not parliamentarians that really don't believe in international cooperation and wants to sow division between us rather than keep us united.
Thank you, Magdalena. Allow me to go for a second question, now looking closer also to the international problems and challenges in general. I know your party has a long-standing tradition to promote peace, to promote diplomatic solutions, to strengthen the international multilateral order, which is unfortunately currently quite under threat. So what can you as a country, Sweden, but also what can Europe as a whole do with progressive answers to strengthen as much as we can this multilateral approach again in these turbulent, difficult times?
Well, I mean, what happened when Russia decided to invade Ukraine is what that Putin teared the international order into pieces. And we also know that we have a presidential election in the United States. We don't know yet who will win. But of course, if Trump is again president, we know that our international institutions that are so important for Europe, for global prosperous, for jobs, for economic growth, they will be at risk. This makes it, again, even more important that we do have a strong European Parliament. The coming years could be a fight against authoritarian regimes and democratic regimes, and we need more parliamentarians that do stand strongly behind democratic values.
Thank you, Magdalena, for these words. I think we would all agree. And good luck for the European elections in your country, but of course also for the work to come after that, so for gaining back power in Sweden as soon as you can.
Yeah, let's go campaigning.
Yeah. So now I hand over to Zara again.
We will introduce the next thematic panel, and we still follow the order of our manifesto. We're going to talk about solutions for open and democratic societies. There was supposed to be a video now. No video? So, to introduce this section, we have today with us someone who is not just the architect of the Green Deal, but also someone who stood up to illiberal forces in Europe as first Vice President of the European Commission, and someone who today is still standing up against the far right in the Netherlands. Please welcome on stage Frans Timmermans.
Salve Roma. Grazie per l'invito al Partito Democratico, grazie per questa bellissima giornata, questo congresso veramente ottimo che ci dà la forza per fare questa campagna elettorale e che ci darà la vittoria nelle europee, ne sono sicuro. E poi, signor Sindaco, chiedo anche uno stadio per la Roma. Bravo De Rossi, vero? As you can see, to quote Lord Byron, Rome is in my soul. I was raised in this city and I have taken the city in my heart and in my soul my whole life, so I'm always happy to be here. I want to make a couple of brief points. First of all, I would like all of you, together with me, to acknowledge the incredible heroism of the Russian people who turned out at Navalny's funeral yesterday in Moscow. You have to be to show your face, to speak out in a regime that doesn't stop anywhere, a murdering machine headed by Putin who will kill anyone and who has killed anyone who oppose his rule. And then to find the courage to go out into the street to demonstrate your solidarity with Navalny is incredible. And I think from this place in Rome, we should salute these people and we should tell them, we are with you all the way until Putin is gone. Now, if you look at Russia, you know what we're up against. And I say, like Magdalena, the battle today is the ideological confrontation between those who believe in autocracy, in closed society, in scapegoating minorities, and those who believe in true democracy, in free and open societies where every individual is guaranteed their rights, where there's equality between men and women, where there's space for everyone to be who they want to be, where there's no imposition from government how you need to look, who you need to love, who you need to care for. This is what we stand for. And let me tell you, now that the center-right believes there is a future for them in aligning themselves with the extreme right, let us be clear. We will never do this. We will never enter into alliances with the extreme right. I repeat what Stefan said this morning. I repeat it also for the Dutch Social Democrats. We will never form a coalition with those people who exclude people from society, who are deeply, deeply admirative of Putin, who believe in autocracy as a solution. But fighting for open societies, fighting for just societies, means we need to let science and facts guide us. And we need to inspire people to believe in a better future. The one thing that leads people to be tempted to choose for the extreme right is because the extreme right invites you not to look at the future. They stand with their back to the future, have no solutions except for promising a past that never was, as was also said by Pedro earlier today. So, the essence of the European Green Deal, as we have fought for, the essence is not just fighting the climate crisis. It's fighting it in a just way. The essence of the European Green Deal is creating a transition that will allow everyone to be part of that transition and that redistributes the means in that transition so that nobody will be left behind. If this European election is about anything, it has to be about our pledge, our promise that we will leave no one behind. And I mean no one. I also mean Europe's farmers. As was said before, 80% of the funds in the common agricultural policy end up in the pockets of 20% of the richest farmers and farming enterprises in Europe. 80% of the farmers, especially small landholders, small farmers, are suffering because they have no access to real support from the European Union. This needs to change, and we need to help farmers to make the transition to ecological farming, sustainable farming. Because if we deny the truth of the climate crisis, it doesn't mean the climate crisis will go away. And the truth of the climate crisis is that the first victims of not addressing the climate crisis will be the workers in our factories, will be the farmers on our land, will be the people in precarious situations all across Europe. And these are the people we will always be fighting for. This is the essence of who we are. And finally, my friends, let me say one thing. In this day and age, with so many threats globally, in the middle of an industrial revolution that demands change of us, the jobs of the future are in the economy of the future, not in the economy of the past. And if we do not understand this, we will be swept away from the board by the Americans and the Chinese, who are investing massively in the economy of the future. We need to do the same, and we need to do more. And I say this because we also need to counter the false narrative that there would be sovereignty in nationalism. Sovereignty can only be gained through Europe. And this hasn't changed in more than 100 years. Because as was always maintained by socialists, sovereignty, moving away from your nation a bit, will create distance with your nation. Moving away into the international field completely, especially into the European Union, will strengthen your nation. We can only have real sovereignty for our citizens and of our nations if we commit to the European project, which has to be a project of justice. This has not changed in 100 years. It will not change in the future. Believe in Europe, campaign for Europe, and we will win these elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz, for your very inspiring speech that is really in line with the next debate, the next panel that we will have. And thank you, Franz, of course, for all your involvement at the European level, everything that you have done for the Green Deal, and also for the current fight that you are leading in the Netherlands against the far right. We can give a big applause to Franz. Thank you. And I'm calling for the next speakers, for the next panel, the list of speakers will be Katarina Barley, head of the list of SPD, Joanna Schering-Wilgus, Deputy Minister from Poland, Zita Gurmai, the President of PS Women, Oliver Robke, the President of the European Economic and Social Committee. We have also Maria Joao Rodriguez, the President of FEPS, and Enrique López Rujado, the President of YES, our Young European Socialists. Also a big applause for Enrique. Thank you to you all. We're going to speak now about our panel on solution for open and democratic societies, and we had an inspiring speech from Franz, and I would turn now to Katerina Barley, the Vice President of the PS, head of the list Spitzenkandidat in Germany from the SPD. Katerina, you have been vocal in the parliament against authoritarian regime, and you strongly defend the rule of law. So can you tell us what will be the main topic in your campaign in Germany on this and your proposals?
Well, the rule of law is the basis for everything we do, and we see it at the moment very clearly that without democracy, we can't advance in any way. So I think there's several things we have to do. Of course, we have to do good politics, and especially social policy. We've talked about that today in length, so I won't go too much into detail, but what we have to do is to see the worries of people and really better their life with our European politics. That's one. The second is that we really have to make clear what is at stake. If we have a look at Europe nowadays, we see that we already have several governments with a far right-wing component, either supporting or being in a coalition or even leading governments. So we have Sweden, we have Finland, states where you would never have imagined that. We have Italy. And we really have to say clearly, this does not fall from the sky. Take the example of Sweden. 30% social democratic votes. 30%. Why do we have this government? Because the conservatives chose to be tolerated by the fascists. In Sweden, they're really fascists, the Sweden Democrats. So they chose authoritarian party over democracy. This is what we have to make clear. It's also about conservatives and liberals opening the door for the extreme right. We have to be very clear on this. And if we talk about this, because I have Zita at my side, this has very concrete consequences. Zita demonstrated against the mobbing or harassment of a little church 2 years ago, together with a few others. Now, last week, her immunity was lifted. Because, why? Of 5 politicians who were involved, 2 were concerned that their immunity was lifted. 2 who are running for the European Parliament. So this happens in authoritarian regimes. There is no rule of law. There's a punishment and a prosecution of political adversaries. So give a cheer for Zita, please. And the third thing, and I want to close here, what I think is maybe the most difficult is show why democracy and why this Europe is so important. And it's difficult because it becomes natural, it's there. So I want to share an experience with you that really left a very deep impression on me. I was campaigning in Frankfurt, and we have 2 candidates from Frankfurt running on our national list, on place 62 and somewhere. One was born and raised in Iran, and the other was born and raised in Morocco. 2 beautiful, fantastic humans and politicians. And the woman, Mona, who was raised in Iran, she's been in Germany for 10 years, she said, "You really don't know how precious the European Union is. You don't really value what you have. Just imagine for a second, the region where I come from, Iran, would come to the idea to create something similar. Also a place where they have wars all the time, like we had in Europe. Imagine Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Israel, getting together and deciding we will have such a union as the European Union is. What would that make a difference in the world? And if you think of that, if you imagine that, you see what you have managed to do in Europe with this beautiful, peaceful European Union. So let's please be aware of it and protect it and fight for democracy and the rule of law.
Thank you, Katerina. Thank you. And talking about countries that have been led for years by conservatives, I'm now turning to Poland. And thank you, Deputy Minister, to be with us. You have been fighting against this conservative government for years, and you have made the demonstration that you can defeat them. So, turning to you, can you tell us what we can expect from the Polish government and our priorities? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If you think during this conference that you have any doubts, is it possible to win? I can tell you in Italy, especially from Poland, is it possible to win? We win in Poland. We won, we won. Last autumn, Poland symbolically returned to Europe. And we fight 8 years. We had during these 8 years, very dark times, and we fight for rule of law, for dialogue, for cooperation, and to be like a strong people in the Europe, and we won, and I am so happy to tell about this today. And of course it was possible, and we have a lot of doubts. We didn't know until the end, the campaign, whether we would win or not. But what's happening, and now we are very strong family in a government, and I am so happy that after 18 years, Left Party, Polish Lewica, is in government now. And I have to tell about it because we have a prime minister from Lewica, Krzysztof Gawkowski. We have 4 ministers, ministers of science, ministers of from digitalization, social policy, and of course equality. Katarzyna Kotula, we know her. He used to be on the conference, PEN's conference as well. And of course we have ministers and all resorts in Poland. And we have a power in the region as well. And I am telling you about it because it is possible. If you have any doubts, it is possible. It is possible even if you have 8 dark years in your country, like in Poland used to be. But people sometimes ask us how it was possible to do this, how you manage with this. And I think it's important is that a Democratic Party was together. We helped together each other. We were like a family. We were solidarity each other. And we work with NGOs organization. We work with people on the streets all the time. And we play on the I think sometimes that we play on the piano. And our opponents, they didn't know about it. And they failed. We won. And at the end, I would like to tell you that I choose the letter P, because I think that we have a fantastic title, the Europe we want. But I think, is it possible that Europe will be social, democratic, and sustainable because we have a power? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you. I'm turning now to our president of PS Women, Zita Gurmain, also fighting against a right-wing government, conservative government, but we have seen in all over Europe these right-wing government attacking everywhere more and more women's rights. So can you tell us in details what is the answer from PS Women? Thank you, Zita.
Buongiorno Roberto, buongiorno the Città de Libertad, buongiorno Italy. It's a great privilege to be here. Roberto did a great job as European parliamentarian and now he is really working with his heart for this city. Can you stand up for Rome? Can you stand up for the European Socialists? Stand up, please stand up. It's so important to stand up for him, to stand up for each other as Katarina stood up next to me. We need a strong solidarity. We need a strong solidarity because LGBTQ and women's rights are threatened. We cannot allow this anymore. Do you think that I have a fear from Orban? No, he can do me a favor. Because it was my party 1.5 years ago. We stood firmly for the Swedish ratification of NATO. 1.5 years, every panel, the Hungarian Socialist Party stood for Sweden. So let's have Sweden do ratification of the NATO. Finally, Hungary did it. Not thanks for Orban. I'm convinced that women's rights and gender equality are instrumentalized by this movement to further their anti-democratic agenda, anti-fascist agendas. This result in pushback to further progress in gender equality. It results in the backtracking of policies and legislation that are already in exercise. Let's have a huge clap hands for Helena Dalli and our great commissioner candidate, Nicola Schmid, the work they did with the Socialist commissioner, hand in hand for a social Europe in the last 5 years. We need to make sure that women's rights cannot be removed anywhere in the EU. We must include abortion in the European Charter of Fundamental Rights and establish a formal council configuration for gender equality, diversity, anti-discrimination. And I'm so proud my former group, the S&D group, the roadmap to a women's rights charter. Robert Biedron did a great job. Let's clap hands for our Polish brother who did the utmost for Poland and for Hungary as well. We must take this movement absolutely seriously, and we cannot take for granted the progress we have already made, as we know all too well how easily that can be undone. And I am very proud because we are going to adopt a manifesto of a feminist Europe. This is the party with feminists. Let's stand up for feminism in Europe. Dear sisters and brothers, we fight it for the last 50 years. And don't forget one thing. In the Treaty of Rome in 1957, equal pay for equal work has been there, and we still have to fight for it. Don't give up. We need to win the next European election. Thank you.
Thank you, Zita. Thank you, Zita, for your very energetic speech. And I'm turning to Enric. Enric, the president of YES, the Young European Socialists. And we know that young people have really suffered of the different crises that we have lived through over the past years. So please share with us what are the proposals from YES for the young Europeans to have a better life, to have equal opportunities, and to have a better future as they have. Thank you, Enric.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Yonek. And to answer this question, we need to understand that dimension of the crisis that young people are living today. Because after the financial crisis of 2008, they nearly destroyed the opportunities of an entire generation, forcing young people, especially in the south of Europe, to go to other countries to find precarious jobs. Now we had to overcome the demand of young people to develop their projects of life. At the moment, we are living through a cost of living crisis and a housing crisis that is preventing us to fully develop as citizens in our societies, a climate crisis that is jeopardizing our future, a democracy crisis with the rise of the far right, and a geopolitical crisis, mainly with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, but also with the surge of many conflicts in our neighborhood and the cruel situation that we are witnessing in Gaza. So the prospects for young people now are not precisely the best. But despite of that, we are hopeful. And we think that the European Union, and especially a European Union led by the Socialists and the Social Democrats, is the only way to provide effective solutions to the challenges that young people are facing today. And that's why we in YES have been very vocal in pushing for an ambitious agenda in topics that we believe are at the core of the preoccupations of young people. And one of these rises on top of the other one, that is housing. Young people deserve to have a decent roof to live under. And what we are seeing in our cities, in our towns all across Europe is simply not correct and morally wrong. Because young people have to... Thank you. We are seeing how young people are paying 500 euros, 600 euros to rent a couch or a room in cities like my city in Barcelona, but Paris, London, everywhere else. So this is morally wrong and a European crisis, a European housing emergency that we demand European solutions for. And we have seen it before. We have seen before when in front of a European crisis, the EU has looked for new mechanisms and new ways to act. And that is why we are proposing a European facility for the promotion of public housing so that the European Union builds apartments for young people so that they can have decent houses to develop their projects of life. And I could continue with many topics that are really close to our heart. Mental health, banning unpaid internships, a practice that is terrible and many of us have suffered in many occasions. But I want to have a small mention with, towards the young people of Ukraine. The first thing we did when we were elected in our Congress in Barcelona in October was to develop a mission to Kyiv, and we witnessed the scars of the horrors that happened there. But at the same time, we witnessed a youth that is vibrant, that is hopeful, and it's hopeful for a European future. So we must continue to support Ukraine with necessary weapons and necessary ammunition so that they win the Russian aggressor, but also to continue to support the youth so they can have a decent future in Ukraine, but also in the European Union. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Enrique. Thank you, Enrique. I'm turning now to Oliver Robke, the President of the European Economic and Social Council, very important body in the EU. So please, Oliver, how can civil society help us to push a progressive agenda in the EU?
Yes, dear colleagues, thank you, Yannick. I think civil society is already a vehicle that pushes many of the progressive policies that we have in place today in Europe. But for civil society to be heard, we need a strong institution, we need a strong platform. And I'm convinced that the ESC plays here a key role because we are the EU institution bringing together trade unions, workers, employers and civil society organizations. And I'm convinced that this role must be reinforced because if I look back, you ask what can be the role pushing for social or for progressive policies. Just to mention again the landmark decision, the landmark initiative of Nicola Schmidt to make sure that each and every worker across Europe should benefit from a fair and decent wage. This is really a great initiative. We were one of the first EU institutions supporting this. And I could mention a lot of other initiatives like an action plan for social economy or more a new economic governance framework, which is now on track to give more free space for investments in social policies, in social investments, in a more equal society. All these policies we are pushing for in the ESC. So therefore I think it is important to have a strong voice of civil society. But I think the mission is not accomplished. And therefore I think